Is he or isn't he is the eighth episode of the second season of All Grown Up, and honestly, it's a little bit stupid. It's a little bit unrealistic. If they just focused on Dill, it would have been fine, but to bring in the rest of the student body was just ridiculous and unrealistic. Dill has an imaginary alien friend called Izzy, and that's fine. I think we could have done some analysis from a child psychology perspective there, and actually, there is something that I thought worked really well, but it's a spoiler, so I'll get into that in a moment. And Chuckie is currently running for safety commissioner. And admittedly, Chuckie is not the best candidate for that, but it was quite fun how that played out. Chuckie was passionate about it. He got into he injured some people in the episode, which I thought was pretty entertaining. But Izzy is also a candidate according to other students. And it's just stupid. It's a really stupid way to treat this character because it's not realistic. Not that I'm saying every all grown up episode has to be realistic, but it has to be relatable. And there is no way that a character or a student in real life would have an imaginary alien friend and then all of a sudden everybody would love this. No, Dill would be bullied, he would be teased, the other characters or students might engage with Izzy in a mocking, ironic kind of way, but they wouldn't get behind him and support him and pretend that he's a great individual when he doesn't exist. So, had it just been about Dill and Izzy, and maybe Izzy running for safety commissioner and Dill kind of being behind that, that could have been fascinating. But instead, they just said, no, everybody loves him, and the teachers love him, and he's a real but imaginary to everybody. And it's almost like the writers don't know what it's like to be at school, which is obviously nonsense because they all would have went to school, and there is no way at all that this is how this would have played out. Dill would have been made fun of, people would have mocked Izzy and made an absolute fool out of him, and they just didn't seem to grasp that, and because of that I couldn't get behind the narrative. As I said, the concept of Izzy is fine, and if Dill had made Izzy run for school safety commissioner, that could have worked. And maybe because they didn't want to hurt Dill's feelings, they could have supported Izzy. By they, I mean obviously Tommy, Phil, and Lil, but that's not what they did, and instead they made a story that's just too unrealistic, and I didn't care for it. I thought it was terrible. Really, really poorly executed narrative. However, there is one moment that I thought was very, very clever, and this is a spoiler, but before I say that, I want to say that I really liked the character of Amelia. I liked how she was designed. I thought she was a really interesting individual, and I hope we get to see more of her. Now, the spoiler, and this is the only thing I can really praise the episode for doing right. So, this is a huge spoiler for something that happens. And Chuckie is on the lawnmower and he runs over the towel next to Dill. Let's not ignore the fact that he could have easily ran over Dill as well, which would have been disastrous and potentially murderous. But ignoring that, he ran over the towel where Izzy was lying. And this basically means that Chuckie murdered Izzy. And I think that this was Dill's way of acknowledging that his imaginary alien friend got out of hand and it got out of his control. So he decided to get rid of the imaginary friend because everybody else became obsessed with it, so it no longer became his special, unique thing. And it was something that everybody else shared with him, so it was no longer fun and weird and quirky. So he took the opportunity of Chuckie running over the towel to basically kill off Izzy. And I think that was really fascinating and really interesting to see how Dill's brain there worked. Of course, one could argue that that's not what Dill did and that he genuinely believed Chuckie killed his friend, but I think it was Dill taking advantage of the situation to kill off Izzy because Izzy was no longer in his control. And I think that was pretty well done within the episode. So, assuming that's what they intended, of course. But other than that, I thought it was a terrible take on what could have been an interesting episode. It's not a good episode. It's not a good story. Izzy or isn't he could have been fascinating. It could have been an interesting look at how Dill's mind worked. But instead, it just suggested that the people who wrote it have no idea what it's like to go to school, and they had no idea how other students would respond to the kid with the weird new imaginary alien friend. It was all just a bit terrible.